Welcome to our session, The Future We Dare to Localize. And this will be a spin-off of our keynote from LocWorld in Malmö 2025. My name is Dominique Pultz. Hello, I will be your host today. And I work at the intersection of localization, systems thinking, and strategy, currently the CRO at Seprotec. Over the past 15 years, I've helped global organizations rethink how they scale meaningful content across markets and cultures. So let us go back to the shores of the Swedish coast, where we spent some time together this summer, and our journey began on this beautiful stage in Malmö. And we were in front of an audience of localization professionals, and we asked a powerful question, right? Does the future of localization start with you? So today we are back with 3 billion minds who helped spark that conversation. Well, the question is, where are we going to sail next? So I have with me here today 3 amazing humans who are supporting this conversation. Olga Stokowiec, Technical Program Manager at Maxon, and she loves structure, that's for sure, trumpet and her dog, and not necessarily in that order. For her, a vision is a North Star and a guide through complexity that still leaves room for experimentation. Hello, Olga, and welcome.
Hi, Dominique. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
And next up, we have Georg Ell, CEO at Phrase. He's a skipper at heart and a CEO by trade. And Georg sees visions as a visible horizon. You just need the right vessel and the right crew to reach them. Welcome, Georg.
Great metaphor. Thank you.
And last but not least, our powerhouse Kirsten Burns, founder and CEO at Burns Language Consulting. And just like me, she's a sci-fi fan and a corporate rebel. Kirsten left BMW 2 decades ago to build a company where vision is redefined every year with her team. For her, a true vision must have an emotional gravity. It should move people. So team, our session, welcome Kirsten, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so our session was really bold, guys, I think. And for me, this left like 3 clear takeaways that we had here. So one, we need localization workflows that are fit for purpose. We must learn to scale content without drowning in it. And we're running out of time to rethink talents and roles. So let us start this conversation maybe with that first takeaway. And Olga, you talked in your vision that you presented to the crowd in Malmö about your pop localization idea. And this is, at least for me, also closely tied to a fit for purpose mindset. So how do you see that approach gaining traction and relevance?
Thanks. So, as a reminder to everyone, because maybe not everyone was aware of what pop localization is and what I was talking about. So I proposed this hypothesis that localization with the AI and all the technological advancements going on will evolve in a sort of normal distribution way. We know the normal distribution curve, where this is the majority and like two ends of it. So I propose that the majority of localization will be what I call the pop localization, and it will be workflows orchestrated with AI and also content translated or pre-translated to some extent with some flavor of AI. And then on the fringe ends of this little graph, we will have companies that will drive themselves into extinction by mindlessly shoving everything into AI without really thinking about what they are doing and why they are doing it. And on the other side of the spectrum, we will have the human translators who will be perceived as luxury good, maybe translating more niche domains, more niche products with extra quality for maybe smaller scale. And so I see this gain traction in really 2 ways. First, a more literal is that I see that this approach and this idea of pop localization still resonates with people, and I still have conversations about that, and people are really interested in the concept of pop localization. And the second way this is gaining traction, I think, is just what I'm observing in practice when I talk to other localization professionals, attend events, conferences, is that really the part that is mindlessly adopting AI, I think that is slowly dying out organically because we're gaining maturity and we're gaining better understanding of what AI is and the capabilities. And so I don't think this is really happening much anymore. People just mindlessly shoving everything into AI and without any quality control or understanding what is happening under the hood. But definitely there's way more AI orchestration, both on the level of just AI doing the translation work. So we have terminology augmented generation where we're feeding our terminology into generative AI, and we have AI fed with the translation memories and glossaries. So AI is doing a lot of the mundane work of terminology checks and so that humans can add extra value. And then the second part of it is that AI is really also automating the processes alone. So AI is the thing that is connecting different tools and making sure that the project management is actually more streamlined and we're not manually chasing deadlines, sending emails, checking if everything looks good in the spreadsheets. And of course, quality checks. So AI is also the enabler for quality assurance automation. And we have new metrics popping up. We have new tools for that. So definitely in that sense, the pop localization automated and orchestrated by AI is happening. And then, of course, we still have the niche translators, human translators who are offering this bonus extra experience, and that is still happening. So we have action sports translators. I recently had an amazing experience at a museum where the original text and the exhibition descriptions were in German with excellent English translation. And that is the additional emotional layer where the luxury value of translation comes in, which makes you feel special and makes you feel like you're participating in something curated. So I think this is where I see the pop localization theory gaining traction in practice.
Yeah, I loved your slide, by the way, and thank you for explaining this once more, that you chose to go with a Gauss curve to explain that concept of localization. And I think that we're really seeing this class coming together, right? So maybe I would like to ask both Kerstin and Georg to touch on 2 points here. So maybe Georg, you can first go with those who really think that they can just throw over everything to the IT departments and solve this with technology instead of, you know, having the human take part in it. So maybe we can start with that end, that too quick adoption, that not thinking the whole process through so it really is fit for the purpose. So maybe you can start with that part.
Yeah, I think that AI presents amazing opportunities, but also risks for localization and broader content transformation and adaptation. There's been a lot of focus on the opportunities. And I think when we were at LocWorld in Malmö, I found it interesting the difference between LocWorld Malmö and LocWorld Monterey later in the year. And I think the psychology and the optimism around AI, I've seen it shift a little bit as the year has gone on. 2025 was supposed to be the year that AI was going to deliver these extraordinary transformational experiences at scale. And we've seen some of that, but much less than expected. Actually, what we've mostly seen is people discover how hard it is to deploy AI confidently at true scale. So there's opportunity there, but we're still working out how to make the most of it. The risk that I see with AI is still in this mindless use that Olga was talking about. And I see that mostly coming out about where IT departments start to tell their counterparts that this is a solved problem. And how I see this happening sometimes is let's pick marketing. Let's say a chief marketing officer is a bit frustrated with the cost or the time to market that traditional localization brings. And then what they do is they turn to IT and they say, can't you help me do this cheaper and faster? And they say, sure, we've got this. It's just an API call. And then they sort of plug it together and they run a demo. And the demo looks initially appealing. At a small scale, it looks like, wow, that's really impressive. And then, that takes on a life of its own. And you start to see, IT departments saying, will now take over. We don't need a localization team anymore. We don't need services. We don't need software. This is an API call. We've got this. Now, I'm painting a kind of extreme picture, but I have seen in some companies localization teams and services and software be taken out entirely with redundancies, unfortunately, because of this kind of DIY mindset. And so I think there's a risk to the companies because, to Olga's point, when you do just mindlessly throw things into AI, it might work at a demo scale, but it does not work at enterprise scale and things start to break. And I do think we'll see companies go through a learning cycle with this, and hopefully others will learn from the mistakes of the early trialists of this approach. And there's the risk, I think, is in trust in brands. And that is incredibly important. Now, I was talking to a travel booking company, for example, the other day, and they see their business as being potentially very disrupted over the next year by ChatGPT, because it's going to start to, and already does in the US, allow you to procure things through that interface, right? So their concern is if you can just go to ChatGPT and say, help me plan a trip, and you can book flights, you can book a hotel, you can book your experiences all through that interface, well, then they become bypassed. That's the concern. And of course, the solution to that is that they need to provide amazing experiences, because I'll use myself as an example. When I book travel, I might go, or when I want to, I'm a big barbecue fan. When I'm looking at like buying a new barbecue or a new gadget, right? Another passion of mine. You go to ChatGPT, say, what are the best solutions in this space? And it'll give you 3 or 4 suggestions. But then I use that as a jumping off point and I go to where the content really sits. I want to go to YouTube. I want to go to TripAdvisor. I want to go to Booking.com. I want to go to, places where other users and expert reviewers and professionals have all brought the video experience. They've written a long form, blog about it. They've brought that whole thing to life, because I trust that. I don't yet trust ChatGPT to just tell me and I blindly follow. I don't trust. So you need to maintain trust. And this is to Olga's point around emotional experiences, right? We need visuals. We need language that speaks to us. It needs to connect emotionally. And if you just throw all that into an AI, you are not going to get that connection emotionally. So I think there is a risk if people don't do this right. Some people will crash headlong into that risk and they'll provide an example to everyone else. But I do think localization teams, and I'll sort of close with this, have a responsibility to help themselves, save themselves. And there is a risk when localization teams are simply too reactive, that they are just seen as a cost center, that's something that is at the end of a production line. My sort of over the last few events that I've been at, I've made this statement and I've seen a lot of people nodding in audiences. And I think partly because they recognize the risk and partly they sort of see a little bit of that in their own experience. And when they can just insert 5%, 10% of their time to do something proactive and can go back to the business and say, I can actually help you deliver an experience you didn't know was possible. That is then suddenly a value add back to the business, and that 5%, 10%, the people want to invest in that, and then it can grow from there. So that's my sort of call to action for lock teams is, don't allow yourself to be bypassed, and you've got to make that time for that little proactive value add.
Well, thanks for this on-point explanation. At least I'm nodding my head as well here, and I can share your concerns. I hope we're not in the echo chamber when this is related to this, but this is exactly what I'm experiencing. And my advice in these cases is always to maybe go back to some of the already existing and confirmed workflows that you have around risk assessment, right? So it might be my economist head talking here, but I think that this is something that still needs some education, right? How can I make a risk assessment and what kind of points will I add to this risk assessment to then educate others within the company? And I think this is a very powerful way to do this. And I know that you, Kerstin, you have a lot of clients and customers who really come from the other end of the spectrum, right? Who will maybe try to avoid any kind of change in their workflows and who are a little bit difficult to convince that fit for purpose is also a valid procedure. So what is your experience here? How do you convince people to maybe go away from the already existing workflows that tend to be a bit rigid and that maybe then in turn result into what Georg just said, that others in the company in other management positions feel that localization teams can be obsolete? So how do you educate them? How do you convince them about what Olga and Georg just said?
Okay, interesting framing. I would actually frame it a little bit differently because we have different kinds of customers. Rarely mature localization teams work with us because they usually do what Olga just described, which I love. For me, this is a lived vision. But sadly, my clients usually don't have that, and they don't have that vision, and they often don't have a mature localization team at all. So they are maybe 1, 2, or 3 people dealing with the bulk work of a translation, everything translation really, localization, you name it. And they get lots of pressure from their management to actually move away from the existing workflows and systems and platforms, because management thinks, oh, let's do everything with AI. No, it's great. It's there. We've solved that problem. I heard that actually on the language intelligence conference, and I was upset about many people in the audience were very upset that someone actually dared say that, because it's not true. It's not a solved problem. It's something you have to really think about. So this is, for us, it is very hard. We try to support these teams, these people, to convince management to go for a good approach. Because if you throw everything away, if you don't have any processes anymore, rigid workflows aren't good, but workflows are good, processes are good. You need that. And you need the knowledge of that to at least train the AI to do that, the LLMs or whatever, right? And you need interfaces, and it all costs money. And if you then start calculating business cases, then even management gets it. But you really have to do that because they think you just press a button and it's all working, it's all done. You don't need the people anymore. You don't need any systems anymore. You don't need a platform anymore for your data. And this is something that we actually now discuss with people quite a lot, especially many even large companies are under the impression that they don't need any of that old stuff anymore, because they don't understand that if you have a good place, like a platform, like a TMS actually, where you have all your data, your processes, you can have your systems connected, you can use AI capabilities. If you don't have a localization and IT team that actually does all that for you, you need a platform like that. But they don't really want to pay for that anymore because they think it's solved. So it's quite tough. I wish I had people like Olga to talk to because they get it, but they don't need my help because they get it. So yeah, maybe that's what I would like to add here to this discussion, because you guys already said so many true things. I don't really want to add that much more to this.
I think one of the things I'm hearing a lot of people talk about now at our events is, and I mean our industry's events, is how localization stops using the words translation and localization because it has a connotation that isn't necessarily completely helpful. So people are describing themselves as like global growth or product growth or cultural adaptation, right? In different ways. And what they're saying is, I want to be in the room with the sales team when they're planning their new Japanese campaign to make it as successful as possible. And that is a totally different, and then they're invited in. Whereas if they come and they say, you know, we need to improve the linguistic measures, then they're seen as not relevant for that meeting. So it's how we change the language we use to make the work that we do like very relevant to the business objectives. That seems to be a big topic. And I think it could be about addressing job titles and just really trying to develop a muscle where we don't say translation, we don't say localization, which is quite hard, but it goes back to, we want to help you build the trust in this campaign so that customers convert.
Yeah.
And if I can add one more thing to that, like, sure, we need to talk the language of business. We already know that we need to speak the language of impact. And as Georg said, talk more about how we are elevating experiences, how we're elevating brand image. But I think one thing that also helped me when getting executive buy-in, when talking to the non-localization stakeholders, is also putting on a product manager hat. And product managers are talking to customers, they are asking questions, they are doing research. And even if you're not called product manager, that mindset is still incredibly helpful. Because if you talk to not just external customers, but to your colleagues that you work with on the regular basis, you go to your marketing team, your sales team, your product team, the engineers who are impacted by localization because you're adding an extra step in their workflow, and ask them for feedback. And if they show what their pain points are, they give you actual examples of when localization is an amplifier and when localization is a bottleneck. If you bring that to the executive level leadership, if you add that to your pitch for localization solutions, that also helps, because you're not just talking about money. You're not just talking about ROI, not even about, how you're improving the user experience on the global scale, but also how the granular improvements internally will make the lives of everyone around you better. If you have a process, if you have workflows, if you have the right tool set, suddenly localization is not a pain. You're not just the most annoying person in the room who's chasing everyone for strings, for deadlines, but suddenly you're an enabler and you are a growth driver, not just externally on the global scale, but also internally, because you make lives easier, not more difficult.
And who would be better equipped to find the right words to explain this to other people than us? Those who already know what a terminology is, so we can build that terminology for us. I think that's really important, and I think that's also at the core of what we're saying, right? Find the right words to convince people about things that you know are good for the company and can improve everybody's experience. What I think some of our listeners or people who are watching this might wonder is, okay, how exactly do I do this, right? So how exactly can I build that core of pop localization, that content that is scaling endlessly? And Georg, I know that you've talked a lot in your vision about this, but maybe let's get a bit more practical, right? Because I think that you also said it's not necessarily a tech problem, it's more of a vision problem and of setting those processes that we have all touched on correctly. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this. How do I exactly build that localization at scale?
Yeah. So if we start with the end in mind, so we've got, as Olga said, the business objectives, which may be sales related, maybe conversion related, but above all, they're about people taking actions with our company, with our product that we want them to take. So how do we convince them to take those actions that we want them to take? Well, they have to trust in us. They have to feel, well, let's just say trust is a good shorthand for many things. So let's work back from that. How can we achieve a level of trust with our consumers, users, whoever the audience are, partners, channel partners, affiliates, licensees, etc., many different audiences? How can we achieve that? Well, in order to do that, we need a degree of combining accuracy and fluency and emotional resonance. And so those are things that are beyond like linguistic quality and just accuracy. What we need is, you don't want fluent nonsense. You don't want emotionally resonant things that talk about your competitor by accident, right? Which has happened when people just throw things into LLMs. So you want all the benefits of the creativity, but you want a degree of structure and differentiation. You want to sound different if you're Adidas to Nike or Pepsi to Coke or Salesforce to Oracle, right? And you don't want accidentally the wrong things to creep in, right? You have product terminology, all that stuff you folks are talking about. So then you work backwards from that and you say, well, we all know that LLMs are powerful, but we all know now as well that it really matters what you put in to that context window. That's how you get differentiation, right? The LLM itself, if you take one off the shelf, is not going to be differentiated except by the prompts and the context that you give it. So now we've opened up two interesting areas of evaluation. Firstly, are we just going to take an off-the-shelf LLM, or are we going to fine-tune something, right? No, now let's sort of put that in one interesting category for a deeper evaluation. And the other thing is, well, what are we going to do to build context and prompts that are going to deliver this fantastic differentiation? So this is where suddenly it gets really interesting, because you've now kind of taken the business leadership on a journey that says, well, in order to develop trust, we need to have some sophisticated and differentiated choice about the models we use and the context we feed them. And this is where the technology and the services can be very interesting, because actually, and this is where it hopefully starts to become clear to business leadership, we don't just want to give this to IT, right? Because IT, well, now you're going to build a system for fine tuning. You're going to take the time to do that. You're going to maintain that, or you're going to build a system for context engineering and you're going to take the time to maintain that. And context is so fascinating because today context is relatively basic. It's like, are we speaking to male, female? Is there an age demographic? Is there a location in which this audience resides? But context could be many thousands of more interesting things, many of which could change in real time. Context could be, what's the weather in that location? What is that person's previous purchase history with us? What is that person's political affiliation? Did something happen to their favorite sports team? Was there just recently a landslide in their area? Are they accessing us from a place that is different from the place that they usually access us from, right? They're away from home. What's the seasonality, right? There's so many different layers, and many of those could be real time. So suddenly this whole area of context, or people use different words for it, like knowledge graphs, these things, these data lakes, these things are going to evolve to become really interesting areas from which ultimately a lot of the end value is created. So hopefully then it starts to become clear to everybody that you don't just want to give this to IT, because if you do, A, they haven't got the skills, and B, they're essentially reinventing the wheel on many things, and that's a total waste of time and money. But putting all of that together requires expertise and skills, and that expertise and skills is going to be a little bit different in the future from today. And I see that we're increasingly needing localization teams, and I've used that word, and we need a different, better word for it, language intelligence, directors, content cultural adaptation managers, whatever they're going to be called, global growth folks. We need them to have increasingly a technical skill set and a business skill set. And neither of those things is using the old linguistic measures. And maybe it's going to be difficult to find many unicorns who can combine both. So there may be sort of two tracks in that area. But I think it also creates a lot of opportunity for services to create differentiated experiences, for software to do differentiated experiences, for services to teach these localization teams the new skills that they need. But the reason why you would do all of this goes back to the very top, which is that differentiated content that develops trust in the audiences you're trying to speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can just agree, and I have to quote a friend here. You can't have a dolphin taking a coconut out of a palm tree. So exactly what you're saying, right? You have to have a good combination of different skills. And I was wondering, and that's maybe a question to Kerstin, because I recently heard in a presentation that approximately 95 of current AI activities within companies are failing. That these were numbers related to the German economy, though, so I'm not sure if this is something that we can globally also say that it's 95%, but it's definitely a high amount of projects that are failing, mainly due to that fact that Georg just described, that you're having dolphins taking coconut out of palm trees. So, Kerstin, what do you think? How many more of these projects will we see fail? Did you see some fail? And do you have like maybe 2 or 3 tips of, except what Georg just said, okay, don't let IT do the whole thing. But maybe on top of that, like other tips for our listeners today, what to avoid so that their project is not one of the 95%.
Yes, I want to say too many are failing. I was also participating in failing projects of this kind, which I think is a good thing, but you have to fail fast, right? You have to test a lot of things. And I mean, I'm now talking not about what probably a Georg and team does, because they're really trying to fit these things into their system, into their ecosystem, so they really work. So for them, of course, it's a different thing. It's a real business decision and very, very high up there, visionary. For my customers and also larger companies, also in the regulatory space, they are very interested in learning. And so I do think if we take a little step back, because we're already right in there in the future, which I love, but if you just look at today, people are still trying a lot. Trial and error is still around. And I urge them to do this, but do it with a goal, right? Not have your expectations managed and manage them with your managers, what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then present what you learned, and then continue from there. And then either decide to go with a professional platform, for example, that offers these possibilities, or decide what you really need to build your own. Because some of these things make total sense to build for your own. And you then need IT, but also cultural engineers, let's call them that for now, or other people that really know why it has to sound like this and what it should be and where the data is. And that would be the other thing that I would urge people to do. Data lakes, they're great. They will be excellent. And for now, because you need data for these lakes, watch your data, because you will need it. You need it now, and you will need it in the future, because this will be the main, and probably Georg also said that, and then I'm sorry, it will be one of the main distinguishing features for your output later. You will need the processes and the AI and the LLMs and everything, but you will for sure need data to feed this and to make it better in terms of terminology, ontology, knowledge graphs, all that. And I think this is what people and management, I toggled up to management these days, and they really don't get it. It's sadly true. Maybe I'm not so good at my job anymore. I'm really trying though, and they really think we don't need all this anymore. They don't understand that if you now press the button and you don't do that anymore, then the data will be lost at some point or won't be good enough anymore. So I would really urge people to watch the data, talk to their management, manage the expectations of everyone, and continue these little projects. And also maybe go to production at some point, really with a goal to going into production. But if you fail, it's okay. Just don't make it that expensive, because some of these projects are really too expensive to fail, and fail quick and build up from there and go on, because we're still it's almost like, I don't know, discovering the Wild West or something. We're still there, we're still learning so much, and it's so exciting. And it's so sad sometimes to see how afraid people are to lose their jobs, to do something wrong, to not know something, to not understand. People need to talk to their fellow peers in the company in different departments and everything to really know what's there and what's true and what's not. Sorry, I'm a bit philosophical maybe.
But I would add one thing to that, which is I'd really encourage listeners to bring their vendors into those conversations. And the magic can happen when you don't just bring one vendor in, but bring two, and bring 2 or 3 in and say, right, you 3 need to work together to help me. And that, I think, is where sometimes the most creative and most effective projects exist, because you've got 3 different approaches of finding the best in each of them. And we know that these initiatives, that there is no one platform that can do absolutely everything. So when you're only talking to one vendor at a time, you're kind of always seeing a piece of the picture. So I would really encourage people to say, look, I need you and you and you in a room on a whiteboard, figure it out. And that's where there's some really good magic.
Okay, so let me maybe condense what Kerstin just said into 2 key factors, and also what Georg said, and then maybe move to Olga, because I would really like to know her opinion on this. So my takeaway is that in terms of talent, we do have people who have these skills, and we have to find them, and we also have to motivate them, right? So Kerstin was touching on the point of fear, for example, which is driving a lot of people away from these kind of jobs, right? So I think one thing that like maybe managers should do is to make sure that they find the right talent within the company and that they motivate them to keep on and to be part of that conversation. And the other thing is, I think if I were a manager and I was like thinking about where to put my money, right, it would most probably be around curating the data, right? Making sure that the data is clean and all of those things. So if somebody would call me tomorrow and say, where should I put my money on these projects? I would probably say, okay, make sure that your data is fine, because you already have the workforce there to support you. You don't have to hire another, I don't know, 50 developers to get there, right? So maybe find out the people in your company who already can do this and support you in that, but put your money into your data curation, and that this is working out fine. So Olga, what do you think about my 2 statements? Are we getting somewhere where you can see yourself within Maxon or something that is supported within your company?
Yeah, these are great statements, not just yours, but everything that Georg said and that Kerstin said. I think there were a lot of good points touched upon. And I also was taking notes on the side so that I don't forget what was particularly interesting. I agree with the data part and the data curation part, because AI is not a magic trick generator. It's not a wizard. It can only amplify what already exists. So if you don't have processes in place, if you don't have knowledge management, if your data is all over the place or it's siloed and every team works separately, that will affect how much you can achieve with automation. It doesn't even have to be AI, but automation in general. So get your ducks in a row, definitely curate your data and make sure that you have central language infrastructure, because I think this is also important to look at localization not just as a workflow, a process, an add-on, but actually an infrastructure. It's something that is critical to how you work and how you deploy products. So I think that's a very important thing. And then the second thing, what Georg said about combining different vendor expertise. I think this is a very important topic. And I was also thinking about that from the buyer perspective lately, that there's a lot of the mindset of being a service provider. But I think it would be useful to go towards being a partner. So when we're buyers, we have a different set of skills. We have a different expertise than the people who build software for localization, for workflow management, people who actually manage translation. So I think there should be more proactive relationship building on both sides, because sometimes buyers don't even know what they don't know. And it would be great if vendors were also asking more questions, coming up with more ideas, because if vendors work with us, they know everything about us. It's like, a therapy. You know all our secrets, you know what works, where it's messy. You have all the data about how our workflows, where are the bottlenecks. And you have a helicopter view because, the vendors have helicopter view because we're marinating in our own processes and we don't see everything, versus vendors have a huge landscape of all their clients and they see what's working, what's not working. So also, give us ideas and make proposals, have this conversation going on. Recently, I also listened to a talk where one of the topics was how machine translation is underutilized, how in majority of translation projects throughout the years, machine translation was not really used as much as it could have. And I'm thinking, how big a part of a problem is it that buyers don't want to use machine translation versus where is the expertise gap or maybe trust gap? Because when we hear machine translation, it's, oh, those funny typos that go viral, that people later talk about how something sounded horribly funny, but also tragic in a non-English speaking market. But if we have more expertise about how machine translation, if tuned correctly, fed with the right data, maybe custom built engine, if that can actually produce good output, we can use it. So a lot of the relationships between buyers and vendors is also about partnership, about proactive approach, and about trust. So I think that's also really important that we build it that way. I think these are the main 2 points that I wanted to talk about right now.
Amazing. We're coming full circle, to be honest, because we're saying, okay, let's get everybody together, what the four of us are actually doing today, right? So we're already putting that vision into a reality of having these conversations on a honest and equal level, which I can mirror this. I had my best experiences in my work when we partnered up with TMS providers, software providers, our customers, and where what you just said, Olga, the buying side already sees this as a partnership, and honestly, then you also deliver the best work in what you're doing when you see that this is an honest and open discussion. And maybe because I'm aware of time, right? I would like to do one last little exercise with you, because we were talking about those titles, right? That communication, those terms that we are using to describe ourselves. So I hope you are so spontaneous. I know that Georg already pitched some, and Olga as well. But maybe let's try this again, right? So let's try to find those terms that could be used for the title so that we give some inspiration out that is practical. So I don't know, maybe because Georg, you already had to, maybe you want to repeat those, or maybe you're coming up with a new idea. And then I'll go Olga and Kerstin, just so that you know, guys, how much time you have to think. So I don't know if you want to scribble it down in our little exercise, but maybe you go, shoot.
I think it's a really interesting question that we should all be asking at conferences and try and get the industry's juices going. So I would say it's best to try and avoid the terms localization, translation. I think if we talk about things like global content experience or global growth, and maybe global content strategy, those would probably be interesting areas. Now, some people might want to put an AI component in there. So it might be AI content strategy, something like that. Global content automation, to Olga's point. AI is just one axis of automation. Anyway, those are some of my offerings.
Perfect. Olga, what are your suggestions for titles?
So there are so many suggestions that I'm thinking about. And I think that, I will come from the challenge perspective first. So I think it's really easy for businesses to trivialize anything that sounds non-technical and to trivialize anything that sounds like humanities. So if we say localization, if we say language, even if we say content, it sometimes doesn't convey the actual impact that our work has, and it doesn't convey the complexity that our work entails. So something that communicates the value, communicates the impact, global growth, international experience, global user experience. Because I think ultimately companies that build products, what they care most is about the end user and how the value that it brings to the end users. So I would go that direction: growth, experience, user experience, whether that's global, international. Maybe this is the direction we could go into.
So Kerstin, you boarded the DeLorean, so actually you already know what those titles will be in the future, right? So maybe you can give us what you've already seen, actually.
Yes, I on and deboarded the DeLorean. That's true, and I like your suggestions a lot. I think we do need to still have a think about that. Maybe we can come back again in a couple of, I don't know, months and have a think on if we found a better word. Maybe have a little brainstorm. Maybe people out there can put some ideas in the comments to this video. Would love that, because I think many people have many good ideas. I still stick with my cultural or civilization engineer. I think the engineer gives you a certain impact, because I do feel that people still think that engineers are something that we need. I will probably omit the AI, because I still hope, I'm still optimistic that humanities and things that humans can do very well, like understanding cultures and transforming even language and data the way that it's really needed out there. It's for people to connect to it, because it also has an emotional pull. Data and information about products needs to speak to people. So I do feel maybe if we also maybe have a think in this direction, and I also have a feeling that these could be very different people we're talking about. There could be different skills with these names, and if they were in a team, we wouldn't need a DeLorean anymore. We would already be in the future. So maybe we can combine these and have all these qualities in one room. And I think, I don't know what will happen, but I think good stuff will happen for sure. And again, sorry for the echo.
Well, all good. And I'm suggesting a completely different point of view, because you know me, I always have those crazy ideas. So maybe we don't need those titles in the future anymore, because we have well curated data also about our own skill sets. And we have a nice little GPT that is fed with all that data. So any manager in the company can just type in whatever skill set they need, and they will automatically find the right person in the company, and not needing any titles anymore, but people will be hired and working for their skill set and what they can do, instead of having, I don't know, a chief, a manager, engineer, specialist, or expert in their title. We will be what we are for what we are. So maybe that's my little extra take on this. So, well, we're already near the end of our session today. So thanks a lot for sharing your ideas, coming back together, and maybe giving people some sparks, some impulses to develop their own visions and be part of that conversation. I'm sure that all four of us are very happy to have those conversations, not only among us, but also with other people in the industry. So I would like to emphasize what Kirsten just said. Please be in touch. Make sure that you let us know what you think about this. And our visions and ideas can only come to life through all the other people we've talked to in LocWorld Malmö and all the other events we've been to this year. It was very invigorating. So we are also, trying to motivate you to keep this conversation going, depending, of course, on the possibilities that you have. But if you cannot travel, there's also so many opportunities to join in events online. So I deeply encourage everybody to have those discussions. And maybe to close the circle of our event in Malmö, we had a little song to promote the beginning of our session. And I'm not sure if anyone really listens to the lyrics, but it's from a Swedish band, which I personally love quite a lot. They are called the Helicopters, and I'm going to end that session with some words that can be related to what we just discussed today and should give you motivation to carry on. So you'll land it. You've got the supplies if they demand it. You've got the looks, you've got the glamour, cut by the chisel and beat by the hammer. Thanks a lot, guys, for an amazing session, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. It was fun.